Hollywood, summer 1937. On the set of Saratoga, Jean Harlow stepped into the scene with her legendary platinum hair and a radiant smile that made the crew feel as if they were gazing at a goddess. But minutes later, that smile vanished. Jean grew dizzy. Her body collapsed. Her breathing turned labored. The entire set fell silent. News spread like lightning. Jean Harlow, MGM's platinum star, in critical condition. Reporters crowded the hospital. The public was stunned. She was only 26, at the height of her career, when fate turned cruel. In a stark white hospital room, Jean Harlow slowly faded. Outside, thousands prayed. But the most shocking detail, William Powell, the man called the great love of her life, was absent in her final hours. Powell's silence became a painful cut, fueling endless speculation. Why didn't he appear? Fear? Helplessness? Or was that love never as deep as people believed? Jean Harlow, Hollywood's first true siren, the platinum blonde, worshipped worldwide, left in loneliness, with countless unanswered questions. The dazzling glow on the screen stood in stark contrast to the mystery of her death, turning her into a short-lived legend. To understand why destiny was so harsh, we must start at the roots: childhood, and the emotional voids that shaped a fragile Jean Harlow behind the blazing exterior. Kansas City, a winter morning in 1911. In a small home, a baby girl was born. Harlean Harlow Carpenter, the name the world would come to know as Jean Harlow. Her father was a dentist. Her mother, Jean Harlow, a young woman burning for the stage. From the beginning, the family was split between a steady, humdrum life and a fierce hunger for fame. When Jean was only a few years old, her parents separated. Her father slipped away, leaving a void that never closed. Her mother took her from Kansas, roaming from place to place, convinced her daughter had been born for the spotlight. Jean grew up under her mother's push, always having to shine, always having to be beautiful, like a doll on display. Outwardly, Jean was a blonde child with clear eyes, smiling in every photograph. Inside, she carried a constant fear, the fear of being abandoned. Without a father's warmth and under the weight of her mother's expectations, Jean formed a conflicted nature, desperate for real love, yet terrified it could vanish at any moment. Childhood friends remembered how Jean often drifted into daydreams, imagining herself a princess, then bursting into tears at the thought of being left behind. That fragility, paired with her striking looks, helped her step into Hollywood easily and made her an easy victim of its glitter. Those early wounds became a long shadow. Jean Harlow entered life with silk wings, radiant but delicate, waiting for a single strong gust to tear them apart. And it would repeat when the love she trusted most let go at the most fateful moment. Late 1920s Hollywood. As the big studios embraced talkies, a blonde girl with a luminous face appeared. Barely in her 20s, Jean Harlow became a sensation. Howard Hughes's Hell's Angels, 1930, made her a star overnight. On screen, Jean was a daring dream, a provocative gaze, a honeyed voice, the platinum allure that left audiences breathless. MGM, the era's most powerful studio, turned her into Hollywood's first platinum blonde bombshell. Silk slip dresses, sultry scenes, posters across America, everything cast Jean as the embodiment of desire and allure. She became a top box office draw, minting millions for the studio. But behind the blinding lights, Jean was just a 20-something with a fragile heart. Every day, she swallowed diet pills and sleeping aids, endured brutal shooting schedules, and smiled even when her body was exhausted. To the public, Jean embodied sensual power. To herself, it was a mask hiding loneliness and wounds no one could see. Close friends recalled that after every lavish party, Jean would sit quietly in her room, remove her makeup, and stare into the mirror for a long time. They love me for this hair, this face, but does anyone love me for who I really am? A question that haunted her nightly. Then a man entered her life, William Powell Urbane, steady, seemingly able to offer the safety Jean craved. From that point, her life drifted into its darkest chapter, where love and abandonment intertwined into a lasting tragedy. Mid-1930s Hollywood. At MGM's glittering parties, Jean Harlow, the screen's platinum blonde, often appeared radiant, drawing every eye. Among the crowd of men, only one face made her pause: William Powell. By then, Powell was a seasoned star, refined, witty, with a half-hidden smile. Unlike those fixated on her platinum allure, he seemed to see something deeper. After so many romantic disappointments, Jean found in Powell a mature, calming presence, a shoulder that might shield her from the chaos beyond. Their romance ignited quickly. They appeared together at events, graced magazine spreads, and became a golden Hollywood couple. Jean loved Powell so deeply she longed for a wedding, a home, a refuge from the relentless lights. Powell felt differently. Divorced once and wary of ties, he approached their love with caution. That mismatch planted the seeds of tragedy. Jean yearned for wholeness. Powell kept his distance. The closer she moved, the further he stepped back. At parties, people saw Jean rest her head on Powell's shoulder, eyes bright with trust, only for him to slip away hours later, leaving her alone beneath the weary lights. Friends say Jean began living in anxiety. She doubted the bond's strength but couldn't let go. To her, Powell wasn't just a lover, but the only lifeline in a sea of fame. His distance cut deeper, cracking her already fragile heart. What looked like a safe harbor turned into an invisible cage, and when Jean collapsed from illness, that cage slammed shut. Powell wasn't there at the end, a void that left Hollywood forever questioning. June 1937. On the Saratoga set, Jean Harlow arrived with her familiar smile, platinum hair gleaming under the lamps. Mid-scene, she blanched, clutched her abdomen, and staggered to the floor. The crew froze. They thought it was simple fatigue, but the persistent pain, cracked lips, and heavy breathing signaled something far worse. Jean was rushed to a Los Angeles hospital, a white room smelling of antiseptic, reporters swarming outside. America hung on every update. Jean Harlow, in critical condition, 26, at the peak of fame, but her body had betrayed the spotlight. In her final days, Jean's mother kept vigil. Close friends came and went, but the figure the public most expected, William Powell, did not appear. His absence felt like a knife in the once-admired love story. Rumors spread. Was Powell cold or too frightened to face death? On the 7th of June 1937, Jean Harlow drew her last breath. Church bells tolled. Headlines exploded in red ink. Platinum blonde dies at 26. All of Hollywood went into mourning. Fans wept for a gifted star. The public whispered, did Jean die of illness or of a love that abandoned her? The mystery of her death, compounded by her lover's absence, turned this tragedy into one of Hollywood's most haunting tales. There was no courtroom for Jean Harlow's death, but Hollywood became a giant tribunal. Press, public, studios, everyone wanted answers. How did a young star at her peak die so soon? The official cause: acute kidney failure. The explanation didn't end the speculation. Many argued MGM worked her to exhaustion, ignoring her declining health. Others cast accusing eyes at William Powell, bound to Jean by a deep bond yet missing at the end. His silence served as unspoken proof to some that he had abandoned her. MGM faced enormous pressure. Saratoga, left unfinished, nearly got shelved. For profit's sake, the studio decided to complete it with doubles and trick shots, turning the film into a final farewell, but also drawing outrage. They turned Jean's death into a money-making tool. Jean Harlow's funeral in Glendale was grand. Thousands pressed against the cemetery gates, tears mixing with cries. Photos of a flower-laden casket ran everywhere, becoming a sorrowful emblem of a golden age. Behind the wreaths, unrest lingered. People kept asking, if MGM had let her rest, if Powell had been there, would Jean Harlow have died so young? Her tragedy didn't end in the hospital room. It opened a never-ending debate about Hollywood's cruelty and love's coldness. Jean Harlow died at 26, but her name never faded. In Hollywood history, she's remembered as the first platinum blonde, the woman who set a new standard of on-screen sensuality and inspired a generation, from Marilyn Monroe to Jane Mansfield. Hell's Angels, Red Dust, Dinner at 8, and finally Saratoga became cinematic milestones. Each re-release moved audiences again, with those sea blue eyes and that radiant smile. Yet alongside the glory lay a fog of tragedy, a death too early, the absence of the man she loved, and questions without answers. Jean Harlow became the emblem of contrast, the blazing light of a Hollywood star, and the mysterious darkness of a fragile fate. People remember her not only for beauty or talent, but for the injustice that ended her life too soon. Today, whenever Harlow's name is mentioned, you cannot separate the silver screen legend from the unresolved love story left behind. Her death still raises a litany of questions. Did Powell truly abandon her? Did MGM drain her for profit? And how much longer might Jean Harlow have lived if she hadn't been pulled into Hollywood's ruthless machine? The lights went out on Jean Harlow's life, but on screen she lives forever, 26, forever Hollywood's short-lived legend.